Okay, we're ready.
All right, perfect. Welcome, everyone. Today, we are very excited to talk to you all about scaling and sustaining the implementation of OER materials in the K-12 setting. Today, we're going to spend a little bit of time, since we only have 25 minutes together, going over kind of the project purpose, the goals, and the materials that we went over, the case study of implementation with our Suffern Central school district, and then we'll save time for questions and comments at the end. And also make sure that you have your chat ready, because we're going to ask some questions in a few seconds after we introduce ourselves, and we'll like you to answer them in the chat. But before we truly jump in, I did want to introduce myself. I am Dr. Kristian Lenderman. I am a project director over at Digital Promise. And I have had the great fortune of getting to lead over the past 3 years, the creation of these materials and also the implementation in this new cohort, and just feel really lucky to get to work with our partners and to get to share this work with you today. And unfortunately, my colleague, Dr. Latia White, could not join us today, but she has been co-leading the work with me over the past 3 years, and sends her regards. And I'll pass it over to Stephanie.
Hi, everyone. I apologize for my voice, but 'tis the season in New York. So I'm Stephanie Powell. I am an ENL teacher at the Suffern Central School District. I have spent time as an instructional coach as well. And the work with Digital Promise over the last year about now has been wonderful. And I'm really excited to share this work with everyone.
Awesome. So we'd love for you just to introduce yourself in the chat, who you are, what your role is, where you're from, just because we like to have a little interaction and get to know who you are. We also are not very formal people, so if you have a question or want to interrupt us, you are totally welcome to. But we also understand if you got stuff in the background going on, no worries. So we first wanted to start out with a poll. So and you can drop in the chat 1, 2, 3, or 4. What is your comfort level with facilitating dialogue about equity issues in your role? So 1 would be not comfortable, 2 would be semi-comfortable, 3 would be pretty comfortable, and 4 would be very comfortable. Welcome, Bridget. Welcome, Marla. Welcome, Harper. So we see 3 to 4 in the chat. 3 to 4, great. Yes, Bridget, good point. Yeah, depending on your administration, yes, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, independently, I would say 4, but as a teacher in Texas, I might say 2, right? So depending on your context, that also matters too. So thanks for sharing that. All right, great. Second poll, what do you think is the most important in implementing OER? Is it 1, and you can say, 1, 2, and 3, sure, you can do that if you'd like. But 1, support and coaching to implement, 2, quality resources with implementation guides, or 3, remix materials to apply in different spaces. So I see 2 quality resources for sure. 2, great, 1 and 2, great. Thank you, everyone, for participating. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how we use the inclusive innovation process to design these OER materials, and what we've learned so far in the implementation of these materials across 3 school districts. So I work at Digital Promise, which is a global nonprofit that really focuses on how to expand access to quality research, quality technology, and include communities in the design process to ensure that historically and systematically excluded students are served to their potential. And so our work really is anchored in the League of Innovative Schools, which is 150 districts across the US. And we get to work with those districts to pilot and try out different things to help improve the quality of education that their students are receiving. I happen to work under Digital Promise at the Center for Inclusive Innovation, which really focuses on how do we get communities and students at the table as we design solutions to solve problems. And so we have this model that we use to really ensure that students and teachers and community members are at the forefront of designing solutions to their current challenges and specifically equity challenges. So we go through these phases, really thinking about how do we build a team that has trust, and then how do we use data and community knowledge and context expertise to design and develop solutions that will address the challenges that they face. And then how do we implement it? How do we scale it? And how do we keep the continuous improvement process moving forward? So this project that we're talking about today was centered in Reynoldsburg. I know there's a lot on the screen, so I'm just gonna like talk through it, so don't feel overwhelmed. But this is a journey map of the Reynoldsburg City School design process. So we were funded by the Hewlett Foundation to create a solution to support the discussion of racial equity and social justice in the classroom. So how do we improve discourse in the classroom? What do teachers need? And how can we make sure that students and communities are involved in these conversations? So we went through that entire inclusive innovation process with the Reynoldsburg City Schools, which is in Ohio. And we first started by building a team. Then they did focus groups, they did surveys. Students went and talked to students, teachers went and talked to teachers. What are the challenges that they are facing? And really what they found were some of the things you named in the chat, right? Something about administration, but then also about materials, and then also about community support. So what the Reynoldsburg team really thought that would help would be having structured community dialogue between teachers, students, and community members to help start conversations around equity and around identity, so that community is really welcome into the classroom, and also seeing, the students leading these conversations, so that it's not pinned on an individual teacher, but really it's about the youth leading the way. And so their solution was community Socratic circles that were student led. And so that meant we needed a lot of support to do that, right? Because students can't just show up and be like, hey, I'm leading your circle today, right? So we had to first train teachers, then we had to have teachers implement in the classroom, then students had to be trained, and then students went and were able to bring it to the community. And so through that work, we were able to implement over the year really scaffolding for teachers, students, and then community members to get them to really have this beautiful community Socratic circle, where the mayor came and the superintendent was there, and there was just a lot of really exciting support for that work, because students were really having a high quality critical dialogue about the racial demographics of their district and how the teachers didn't reflect the students. And that was really impactful on a lot of the adults in the room to see the power that students have in their hands. And so I'm going to kind of skip through a few of these things. But really what we did from that project was we said, okay, we have these OER materials, we have a guidebook, we have modules, which I'm going to talk about in a second. What can we do with these to make sure that more teachers across the country are able to use them? So what we did was we put out a okay. I see a question in the chat, and I'm going to address that in a second. Selena, thank you for asking your question. So what we did was we asked folks in our League of Innovative Schools if they were interested in piloting this community Socratic circle model in their schools. And we had 3 districts come to the table who were interested in joining. We started our work in January, and it lasts until next August. And basically the work has been around, for the past year, really getting teachers up to speed on culturally responsive teaching, getting trained in their work, getting trained on the survey and the tools that will be used to measure how students are feeling before and after they participate in these circles. So that way we can show that these circles really do increase the sense of belonging and sense of efficacy for teachers. And then in the spring, the teachers will host a community Socratic circle. So really it's all about capacity building for the instructional coaches and for teachers in using them as materials, but then also about sustaining a tool, a strategy that can promote culturally responsive teaching, social emotional learning, and also the discussion of, important topics that students care about. So these are our participating districts. We have Suffern Central on the call today, woo woo, and Roselle Public Schools, which is in New Jersey, and Capital School District, which is in Delaware. So I'm going to share in the link in the chat, a link to the materials, both the guidebook and the modules. But the guidebook is really the first tool that was created in Reynoldsburg, and it has everything that is needed in terms of scaffolding to be able to have a community Socratic circle. So it starts with what do I need to do to be able to discuss, to have conversations about race and equity? And then also, how do I move that to be able to be community centered? So that's one resource that came out of our first project that's being used in our second. And then the second thing that's coming out is a list of modules that helps teachers develop the skills and capacities that they need to host difficult conversations and learn about culturally responsive teaching while also implementing the Socratic circles. To your question, Selena, teachers were asked to engage outside of class time, but all of our teachers are able to get a stipend for their participation. And so obviously, if you're providing a stipend to teachers, there are union rules about when that work can be done, and when it cannot be done. So some of the work can be done on professional development days, but a lot of the work happens after school, and in their own time, since they are receiving a stipend for their work. But if you have more questions about how we do that, I'm very happy to talk more. So based on the trainings that teachers have had so far, they've really taken some of the really useful tools and phrases and really thought about how I can use this in my classroom. So some are talking about, I really want to use the phrase like what you said reinforces bias against blank groups to help show students that what they said hurt specific groups of people. So instead of just saying, that's racist, or like, you can't say that, don't say that, right? Like actually using a skill to this as a teaching moment to show students what they did and who it impacts. We also talk a lot about like setting up agreements and different discussion agreements from day one and how that's important for when you implement a Socratic circle. And so teachers are taking different tool sets from the modules and from the guidebook to really learn how to implement in their classroom. Other things our teachers are really thinking about what strategies they're going to implement. So that way they can start to build the classroom culture that they want to see as they move forward. And then also thinking about the impact that these will have, because part of the project, and this is a huge part of the project, is a teacher action research component to help inform, what did I do and what was the impact? And so really using data to get teachers into that mindset. And so really, as we've been thinking about these OER resources, we've really been able, because of the grant funding, to provide a lot of wraparound supports, because we know that discussing race and equity is not something that should be taken lightly. And so we want to make sure that we are providing the right supports to make sure that they're implemented correctly, but also having resources that are open for everyone to use. And so it's a nice balance when you think about how can we really provide the scaffolding that educators need, but then also the support. So I'm going to pass it over to Suffern to talk a little bit about what they've been up to. And then at the end, I'll come back to the things we have learned so far.
Thanks, Kristian. So, a little background about Suffern Central. We're located about 35 miles outside of New York City. Historically, we were a very homogenous school district. And over the last 10 years, we've really seen a lot of increase in diversity amongst our student body, a huge increase of English language learners, and topics of race and equity have really started to be important to have in school and have students develop pathways for them to really express themselves about such topics. So I was asked by my director if I would be interested in working with Digital Promise and hosting the PLCs for our group. So we had an open invitation to any high school, middle school student teachers who wanted to join. We had time on our superintendent's conference day that we were able to present what the project was, explain about the requirements, and also the benefits of doing so. At the end, we had 7 participants who are continuing on through the second year. And it's been a really great process. We have had monthly after school PLC meetings where we have hosted things like our own Socratic circles, where we talked about equity and race as teachers. And I think that was a really important opportunity for teachers to have that experience as the students themselves, right? The materials that Digital Promise has provided are truly phenomenal in giving great examples of what we can do in the classroom and a great opportunity to tie it into curriculum. So I think, oh yeah, so Digital Promise has been they're highly organized. Our teachers have been engaging in really deep thinking and learning around equity and race specifically. It's something that is new to some of our teachers to have to think about and to really process. So being able to do so in this forum provides a really safe place for them too as learners. Um, we've been able to recognize as a group our own opportunities for development and to continue having these conversations in classroom and to think about having them as conversations that tie into curriculum that aren't just standing separate. Um, Something that we're still doing a lot of thinking around is how to give it back and pull in the community and bring in that student ownership for things that they choose to want to talk about as part of their Socratic circle. Something else that's obviously very near and dear to my heart is creating these pathways for our emergent bilinguals so that they can also have the tools and not be left out of these conversations on race and equity that very clearly affect their own situations on a daily basis. So all of us are right now planning for our first Socratic circles. We're also starting all of our data collection to see how students feel in the beginning of the year in school. And we're doing surveys and really getting that data so that we can, at the end of the year, go back and assess how this process of Socratic circles with the focus on equity and race helps grow the classroom culture. And we're going to continue to have our PLC meetings so that teachers can also grow their own comfort and start to workshop with one another about potential sticky areas that they might come into in their classrooms.
Thank you, Stephanie. And Stephanie was one of the amazing instructional coaches that we worked with. And so I know that we have 2 minutes left. So the learnings from our first year really are that, the reason I ask in the first, what do you think is the most important? Really what we learned is, you can throw as many resources as you want at educators, but what you really need is a space and time for educators to talk about how they're actually going to use it in the classroom, and then the support from administration to make sure it can happen. And so I think what we've really learned is, we provide monthly trainings, we create space in the PLCs for educators to work together, but looking at the 3 districts, the most successful ones are the ones who have the support from the system level and the system level understanding of why this work matters. And so the resources, of course, matter, but I think also what we've learned is in order to implement, you have to have that wraparound support, both from a professional development standpoint, but then also from that system level to ensure that it's there. And if I could do it again, I would just start with the instructional coaches for the first semester and then go to the teachers, because that's who really can make or break a project like this in my mind. And then I think also we need more resources for lesson planning around different subject areas, because humanities is more used to having these kind of conversations, but it takes a lot more mindset work for science and math teachers to get around to it. And so I think that we need to provide more scaffolding there for the educators. And hopefully the educators can help us by making lessons that we can then share with others. So our next steps, scaling, we don't want these just to stay at the schools that they're at now, but also spread across the districts. Also, we're learning from the implementation and iteration, and hopefully hoping to share out those things that we have learned. And then we also are hoping to be able to offer an individual cheat sheet training. So open it up nationwide to any teacher who would like to use these materials to participate in a cohort, so we can learn, if we don't have the district, buy-in, what would it look like if an individual teacher tried to pick this up and use it, which I think is an interesting and different use case than we've done before. So we now have 5 minutes, and I'd like to transition us to questions, comments, things you're wondering about. And so I'll turn over the floor to y'all.
I'll go. Sorry. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So I'm curious, We in Virginia have recently, semi-recently, we have to have a cultural competency training from the state in order to maintain our licensure. And I wondered how much Digital Promise has run across that, and if it's something that they've taken into consideration in terms of preparing almost like a packaged support system that would help school divisions meet that cultural competency requirement. I don't know if that's something you've run across.
No, honestly, a lot of the school districts that we work with, unfortunately, are having the other issue, right? Where they're like, you can't actually talk about culturally responsive teaching. So
Well, don't get it confused. Like we're there.
that's why I was like, what?
Yeah. So I put a link to it. So yeah, okay. I think that's more of in an effort to control the training. Unfortunately, this is what I just put a link to the VDOE requirement. Anyway, I'm just curious how if that's something that, because I remember when you guys released the learner variability navigator. Yeah. And I brought that kind of back here, and even that even that caused some ruffled some feathers a little bit. And then when I start to bring in other resources, this is even more directly angled at equity. It's challenging. So we just have to have really nuanced conversations, or we'll get shut down. And unfortunately, it's kind of what's caused our OER implementation to stall, is that it enables teachers to have too much, just their own, what's the word I'm looking for? Autonomy in the classroom, and opinions integrated in their own experiences shining through. And I think that it's now we're in an era where that's less welcomed, unfortunately. So I was just curious if you've run into states. New York is a little bit more progressive in that regard. Having grown up in upstate New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, we haven't. And, I don't know if some of this count, like, because this is a pilot with a few districts at a school, it's not like a wide scale implementation, because teachers were able to choose to go to do this project, which was a huge component, right? Is to have that choice, to your point about ruffling feathers and people not being okay with it, right? Like, we still find that even in the East Coast, right? So, but yeah, I'm happy. I haven't really gotten deep into this kind of stuff, but I'm happy to think more about like what packaging this for that process would look like. And, I think we were really careful with the way that we worded the modules, because of a lot of the things that are going on in the world. So that's really interesting. And maybe, I don't know, if you want to take a look at them and see, if there's something that you would like to use, we'd be happy to kind of talk more about piloting them together.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right, y'all. Well, I know that it is 25. I think we had 25 minutes, so I think we did amazing.
Time flies.
Yes. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and put my email in the chat. So if you're interested in learning more, please reach out, or have some other ideas of how you want to partner. Digital Promise is a big organization, so someone's probably doing something interesting to you. If I'm not the one, someone else there is interesting. So feel free to reach out and connect on LinkedIn. And thank you so much for coming today. Thank you to Stephanie for all of her amazing work out in Suffern. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your conference.
Okay, thank you. We're going to stop the record. Thank you very much for this great session.
All right, y'all.